Hi, I'm Jenny Champeau, the director of the Book of Mormon Art Catalog, and I'm here today with Michael Austin. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Jenny.
Michael is the provost and vice president for academic affairs at Snow College. He's the co-founder of By Common Consent Press and the author of 9 books. His most recent book is called The Testimony of Two Nations: How the Book of Mormon Reads and Rereads the Bible. And that was published by University of Illinois Press just this past year. Today we're looking at Mosiah 7 through 10, and the painting we're looking at is by James Fulmer. It's called The Hill North of Shiloh. It was done in 2011. Fulmer is a full-time seminary teacher and has done a lot of paintings and illustrations to sort of fill in the gaps of art that or scenes in the Book of Mormon that aren't visualized as frequently. So Michael, the Hill North of Shiloh is not a place I hear talked about a lot in Sunday school. What is this place? Who are these people? Why is it important?
So the Hill North of Shiloh we read about in Mosiah 7, I think for the first time, but it's a hill overlooking the land of Nephi, which is the land where the Nephites came from when they went to Zarahemla. This scene here doesn't really represent the scene in Mosiah when Ammon's party comes and meets Limhi and the people of the colony of Nephi, or the land of Nephi. What we see here are whole families, men, women, and children, standing on this hill looking at something being destroyed by fire. And this passage is most representative of a passage in Omni, chapter 12, or chapter 1, verses 12 and 13. And this is when the first King Messiah, is warned by a divine instrument that he needs to get all of the people who believe and leave the land of Nephi and go and find a promised land somewhere. And that's the group that goes and finds Zarahemla. And then his son, Mosiah becomes the king, and then his son Benjamin, and then Benjamin's son Mosiah II become, in sequence, the kings of Zarahemla. But that all happens off stage. That all happens in a part of the Book of Mormon that may or may not have been part of the 116 pages. But we leave Enos there in the wilderness. We have these flyover chapters where we just get a little bit of detail, and then all of a sudden it's 300 years later, and we open up in Zarahemla, and then we fill in the backstory. So this is part of the backstory, and this painting represents, I think, the artist's conception of the people who left the land of Nephi, and how disturbed and how distraught they were that they had to leave their city, and their city was burned, and they don't know where they're going. They haven't found Zarahemla yet, and it's a very sad picture. So that scene where the original King Messiah is warned that he needs to leave the land of Nephi is what Bible scholars, and what I call in this most recent book, a type scene.
Right, a type scene.
And it's something that's happened at least 3 times before, where somebody is warned by an angel or by God or by a divine instrument that the city they live in is about to be destroyed and they need to leave. That is the Exodus in the Bible with Moses. That is the beginning of the Book of Mormon in Jerusalem with Lehi and his family. That happens in 2 Nephi 5. That's how the Nephites got to the land of Nephi, is they were warned, Nephi was warned that he needed to leave, and they kind of snuck out in the middle of the night and came to this land. So this is something that keeps happening. As a bonus, it also happens in the Aeneid by Virgil, where Aeneas is warned by his mother, Venus, that Troy is about to be sacked and he has to leave. So this is a really famous type scene. And the way that type scenes work, we can kind of import elements from the earlier stories into the briefer version of the story that we see here. And one of the things that all of those stories have in common is that some people are really glad to go, and some people murmur. Some people build calves of gold and worship them. Some people, like Laman and Lemuel, murmur all the time and want to go back to Jerusalem. So you have always in these type scenes a group of people that leave and they want to go back. So we find out at the end of Omni that as soon as the Nephite population gets to Zarahemla, a group of them want to go back, and that group is they're murmurers, and they kill each other.
Oh, right.
Right.
Yeah.
The first group, they all but 50 of them perish in the wilderness because they were very contentious. So a second group then goes back and is lost for 60 years, for 3 generations, and nobody hears from them. But the first thing that Limhi says when he sees Ammon is, I'm going to quote here, it's Mosiah 7:14. And now it came to pass that after Limhi had heard the words of Ammon, he was exceedingly glad and said, now I know of a surety that my brethren who were in the land of Zarahemla are yet alive. This is a really strange thing to say when you see this group of people from this land where you left all of your family members. Oh my gosh, my family's still alive. They weren't all killed.
Yeah.
So that seems to be what he was expecting. He didn't know how that Mulekite merger with the Nephites was going to play out.
Right.
And all of these people had been, it seems, expecting that the Nephites were destroyed by the people of Zarahemla. So when Ammon, who is a descendant of Zarahemla, comes leading a party looking for them, all of a sudden they have to reorient, and they see that they the situation they're in is not the situation they thought they were in.
Right.
Not only did the Nephites not all get killed, they're the kings now.
Right.
They're the ruling class.
Right.
So there's every reason for them to want to go back now.
Okay, so I mean, it's so hard for me to keep all this straight in my head because we have all these, like you said, gaps of time, and then these different figures and fathers and sons and grandsons, and it jumps forwards and backwards and place to place, and also the role of the narrator in all this. Can you speak to that a little bit about how all this plays out?
Yeah, this is by far the most narratively complex passage in the Book of Mormon. The scene that takes place in the land of Nephi. It's also, I think, the most important passage in the Book of Mormon, and we'll talk about why in a minute.
Okay.
But you have Mormon sort of editing and redacting the records of Ammon, who discovers the record of Zenith. And so you have these 3 different levels of narrative.
Right.
What we call it in narrative theory, 3 different levels of intentionality.
Okay.
Where you have a story within a story within a story.
Right.
And that's really hard to keep track of.
It is.
And then when you have Alma kind of break away, you have a 4th narrative that is within a narrative, within a narrative, within a narrative, within a narrative.
Yeah.
So it's very complex. But the most important thing that happens in the Book of Mormon, other than Christ coming in 3rd Nephi, is that Alma, after listening to Abinadi, starts a church.
Right.
And this is the first church of the first sort of what we would call ecclesia, of the body of believers that we see in any of the scriptures.
Okay.
Up until this point, we don't have churches. We have sort of a state religion in both Israel, but also in Nephite land.
Okay.
You know, people don't have a church. They have a state religion that everyone participates in because it's just what you do. But this is what we would call in the United States a secular church.
Oh, okay.
Which means that you can join it or not join it. You know, you have your choice in whether or not you want to be part of this church. And there's another church in Mosiah and in Alma, the Church of Nehor, that competes with it.
Okay.
So this idea that there are different churches and you can select which one you want to follow, that is really born here.
Okay. So I've noticed there is not a lot of art about these chapters in Mosiah. And I mean, to me, I think maybe they're just hard to illustrate because it's so hard to keep track of who and when we're talking about. And so I think the artist has had to be a little bit creative here. What do you see happening? Is there anything that where you see the artist taking some license here?
Yeah, the fact that the city was burned, that they're looking at this big burning fire of a city.
That's not in the scriptures.
That's not in the scriptures.
Okay.
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 There's nothing in the text that says that the city of Nephi or the city of Shilom or whatever city they're looking at was destroyed by fire. It was just that it was dangerous. You need to get out.
Right. Right. So sort of taking some creative license here to
Yes.
show a group of people, families, supporting each other on their way out, maybe standing on the hill looking back at the city.
Yeah.
It almost reminds me of kind of a Lot's wife sort of a scene of looking back to the destroyed city.
Yeah, exactly. They're looking back at what was destroyed, and they're feeling the loss of what they have lost. And that is, I think, in the artist's mind, that's what's going to motivate some of them as soon as they get to Zarahemla to want to go back. These are very likely the people who decided that they were going to go back because they were never really resolved to losing that.
Interesting. Well, I like this piece because it does visualize a part of the scriptures that I haven't really spent a lot of time with, and it forced me to get in there and try to figure it out. And I think that's what good religious art does, is it sends us back to the scriptures to engage with them in a deeper way. Do you have any like personal reaction to this as in terms of the story or the art or the scriptures?
So I think my first reaction when I saw this was confusion, because I couldn't figure out what it was representing.
Right.
It didn't seem to represent anything in the text. And then it hit me that this is the artist filling in gaps in the text, because there are a lot of gaps in the Book of Mormon. I mean, we think of the Book of Mormon as this 1,000-year story, but really it's 3 set pieces. The Nephi and his family, then you have the Zarahemlans, and then you have the last days. It's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's, half of the time that's covered in the Book of Mormon is not part of the story.
Right.
We have to infer what might have happened. And, civilizations change a lot in 300, 400, 500 years.
Sure, yeah.
And so we have to kind of go back and interpret what we've missed as we've cut from one major type scene or one major set piece of the Book of Mormon to the next. And this does that. This tells us a story that is not in the text, but is inferable from the text. And that's, I think, a very imaginative way to approach it.
Yeah. I do like that Fulmer has included families, including women and children, which aren't mentioned at all in this story. I don't think there's any mention of women and children at all.
No, it makes a point to say that these are 16 strong men.
Yeah, right. But obviously there were going to be women and children in this society too, so I like that Fulmer has included that. Well, thank you so much for helping me think this through today. I appreciate all your insights.
I had a great time.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Jenny.